Hello and welcome to another episode of Indian Global Left. If you are new to the show, please hit that subscribe button. Also consider becoming a YouTube member, a Patreon, or donate small amount given in the link in the description box. Without further ado, let me welcome our guest tonight, Scott Ritter. Scott is an American former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer, former UN Special Commission weapons inspector, author, and commentator. Scott, welcome back to Indian Global Left.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with the ceasefire. Over the past few years, we have seen several ceasefires not lasting because of the absence of a substantive framework for peace. How likely is this ceasefire to last?
Well, the ceasefire is a process. It's not a singularity. There is no ceasefire right now. So to talk about a ceasefire lasting when there is no ceasefire is, is an absurdity. We're talking about a process where both sides have gone as far up the escalation ladder as they rationally can. Any further escalation turns what has been a tragedy into permanent damage, not only for each party in the conflict, but to the region and the globe as well. I think all parties recognize this, with maybe the one exception being Israel, who appears to be the biggest problematic entity here. But this is just the first phase of a longer process to get to a ceasefire that can last. When this was announced, we had two major issues. We had Israel, Lebanon, and we had the United Arab Emirates deciding that they wanted to start their own war with Iran. Apparently, these are unresolved issues that have to be this has to be tightened up before you can have a ceasefire. And again, a ceasefire isn't really going to happen until there's an agreement upon what the final outcome will be. It's hard to talk about a ceasefire when Iran puts a 10-point peace plan on the table. The United States puts a 15-point peace plan on the table. That both parties agree to sit down and work it out over the course of a period of 2 weeks, and the United States rejects the Iranian proposal up front. No ceasefire. So there is no ceasefire right now. There's a need for a ceasefire, and there might even be a desire for a ceasefire, but there is no ceasefire at this point.
Talking about no ceasefire, the most important news is the latest Israeli attack in Lebanon. This is right after this quote-unquote ceasefire was announced, and they have killed reportedly 254 people in what has been called as one of the deadliest attacks since this war began. What is your reading about Israel escalating in Lebanon in the most horrific way, as some UN bodies have called right after this announcement?
Well, first of all, you have to be careful about hyperbole, because to single out this Israeli action as being particularly egregious minimizes the tremendous sins Israel has committed in the past, both against the Palestinians, against the people of Lebanon, and against Iran. It's as if, the Iranian bombardment never took place. Have people taken a look at Tehran and taken a look at the damage that's been done? What Israel did to Beirut, of course, is horrifying. It should be condemned. But to sit here and pretend that this is abnormal, no, it's normal. This is what Israel does. This is who the Israelis are. And so we need to stop treating this as an anomaly and understand that this is literally the norm for Israel. This is what Israel, this is who they are, and we have to treat them accordingly. The Israelis don't want peace. They can't have peace. Benjamin Netanyahu cannot function in an environment where peace is broken out all over, because he will cease to have any hold on legitimacy. He exists only as a national security leader. He needs crisis. He needs chaos. He needs conflict. So in order to preserve his own personal political legacy, he needs war. And so that's what he's doing. He doesn't want peace. Israel doesn't want peace. And so peace will have to be imposed on it. Um, the question now is, how much does the United States want peace? And what is the United States willing to do to put pressure on Israel to get that peace? Um, and, this is where President Trump has to decide, is he willing to sacrifice his own personal political legacy? Because that's what's on the line here. The end of Donald Trump, the Donald Trump brand. He is very dangerously close to being swept in the midterm elections by the Democrats, who will then hold him and his administration to account. And that's the end of Donald Trump's presidency and legacy. And I think Donald Trump there's a growing recognition that this is indeed, where he's at. And so the question is he going to let Benjamin Netanyahu destroy him? And I think the answer to that is no. But as I said earlier, this is a process. And so we are going to have to let this process play out. And tragically, that means even more people are going to die because Israel is an absolutely irresponsible party.
And when you say more people are going to die, do you just mean in Lebanon or all across the region?
All across the region. This is what Israel does for a living. Israel kills people. They will kill people in Lebanon. They will kill people in Syria. They will kill people in Yemen. They will kill people in Iran. They will kill people wherever they need to kill. They'll kill people directly or indirectly. Israel is responsible for all violence in the Middle East.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the talking points about what the two sides are going to discuss in Islamabad from Saturday. I suppose some reports are saying Friday, some are saying Saturday. I'm not sure about that. I want to particularly ask you about Iranian demands about enrichment, end of sanctions, and the end of U.S. military bases. Donald Trump said that they are going to keep U.S. troops very close. Should Iran not accede to the U.S. demands, they will attack again. What do you make of these clauses?
Well, let's start with enrichment. Iran will retain the right to enrich. This is a 100% guarantee. The only way Iran will relinquish this is for Iran to be destroyed, for the regime to be collapsed, and the United States and Israel have proven incapable of achieving that outcome. There will be compromises made, however, and I believe the compromises will be defined by the agreements that had been almost reached before this current round of fighting began on February 28th. I think at the end of the day, that deal will be the basis of what post-conflict nuclear deal looks like. And for Donald Trump, he can declare a great victory because that deal is better in terms of blocking any potential avenue for Iran to pursue nuclear weapons, which they've never wanted to do, but we have to convince ourselves that they can't. This deal prevents that. The JCPOA did not. So Donald Trump can say, I have a better deal. I promised you a better deal. I gave you a better deal. So I do think that that is going to be on the table. This is where the United States is going to have to come to Israel and say, you got to accept reality here. So there's that. Sanctions will be lifted, totally lifted. The Security Council resolutions wiped clean. IAEA Board of Directors, notifications and such wiped clean. Iran's going to have a clean slate. This is pretty much also a guarantee. U.S. bases, if I were the Iranians, I would not emphasize this too much because it's going to happen. The United States is in retrograde mode as it is. The bases no longer have justification. In areas that Iran doesn't have direct control of, the United States is already starting to leave. Syria, Iraq. Some nations like Qatar have indicated the United States will not be welcomed back. And if there's a peace agreement that truly allows for Iran to exist without restrictions, then there's no need for an American military presence in the region, especially a large military presence. And so rather than the Iranians seeking humiliating America, which won't work, I'm just saying it straight up, the Iranians will compromise on this and just let Mother Nature take its course. You didn't mention the Strait of Hormuz. that's a big one. But Donald Trump appears to already accept the fact that Iran is going to control the Strait of Hormuz. And in the toll, he is talking about how Iran and the United States will work together. Now, whether or not that is how it plays out, who knows? But I do believe that the Iranians have talked about reparations, but there won't be reparations directly. But what I do believe is that the tolling that will take place at the Strait of Hormuz, that money will be collected and used to pay for the reconstruction in Iran and reconstruction elsewhere. So I think that's an elegant solution that can be had. Um, the United States put down some demands that just aren't realistic at all. In order to get those demands, you have to win the war. And the United States most certainly didn't win this war.
And what would be some of the demands that the United States would put forward? Because we're not clear about that. The White House officials, like Caroline Leavitt, has said that the points that are circulating in media are not the points that we are pushing forward. There are lots of speculations. If you could give us your sense of what the U.S. would be pushing forward.
Well, the two big ones are uh, no nuclear enrichment and no missile program, which means it isn't going to, those aren't going to happen. Um, will Iran agree to some sort of limitation on its missiles? I don't know. I don't know if they will or not. The missiles are the thing that enabled them to win this war. Um, and if I were Iran, I wouldn't even consider it until you put Israel's nuclear weapons on the table. But nobody's even talking Israel's nuclear program. So, at the end of the day, you know, I think the U.S. demands are going to come down to some sort of compromise agreement on enrichment and compromise agreement on the Strait of Hormuz. And rather than go after Iran's missile program to, come up with, a security mechanism in the region that helps prevent war from breaking out and therefore makes Iran's missile program moot in the eyes of its neighbors. But again, the United States doesn't have a strong hand here. It's the United States that needs this war to end more than Iran needs this war to end.
Um, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how would you describe the the outcome of this war so far, given there has been so much hasbara? If you could give us a little bit of clarity on military terms, how did Iran fare during these 40 days? That would be helpful because if the war starts again, then it might be of interest to know what has happened in the last 40 days, militarily speaking.
Well, let's just put it in broad picture. Iran took on the world's two most powerful militaries, um, Israel and the United States, especially when it comes to air power. Iran took them on and denied them victory. The goals and objectives of the United States and Israel were regime change. This did not happen. Indeed, the regime got stronger. The other goal was the destruction and suppression of Iran's ballistic missile and drone capability. This did not happen. Iran has retained significant capability and has proven the ability to deliver strikes using these missiles and drones to any target out there. The United States likes to talk about destroying the Iranian Navy, but I want to point out that the Iranian Navy yesterday laid mines in the Strait of Hormuz, blocking it off. So clearly, the Iranian Navy isn't destroyed. In fact, I don't think we destroyed very much other than empty buildings because we went into this war not fully understanding or comprehending, how Iran has organized itself for defense. 31 autonomous military districts. Each of which is capable of continuing the fight in isolation from all others. We've never come to grips with that. Iran has been studying the way the United States and Israel wage war for decades now. People tend to forget that Iran had an air defense agreement with Syria, where Iranian air defense specialists were forward deployed together with some Iranian assets. Iran studied how Israel operated, how they communicated, how they, what weapon systems they used. They studied how the United States operated the same way. We had extensive air power involvement over Syria, using every type of aircraft, how we communicated, how we, what weapons we used, etc., what our tactics were. And Iran has adapted accordingly. When you take a look at how this war began, the propaganda was that the United States and Israel annihilated Iran's air defense systems, wiped it out. But did we? Or did the Iranians just not decide to play that phase of the game? Because that phase of the game was defined by long-range standoff weapons. It wasn't that Israeli aircraft and American aircraft were physically dominating Iranian airspace. It's that on the periphery, we were able to launch weapons that were able to strike deep inside with great effectiveness, and hit targets. But what targets presented themselves? I will bet that the vast majority of the targets struck by the United States and Israel relating to air defense were decoy targets, and not the real thing. That the real thing was actually in a hide site, in a bunker somewhere, hidden. And what we saw is when the United States and Israel began to deplete their standoff weapons, Iran began to reestablish its air defense system and using all new tactics and capabilities rather than having a radar-focused war, which is the normal air defense model of operations. Iran came in with infrared and electro-optical seeking, changing everything. And that's why they had great success near in this most recent phase in shooting down American aircraft, because they're playing a different game than we were prepared to play. The Iranians have thought this thing through. They know what they're doing. This is a plan 20 years in the making. The United States came in, and we've been changing our plan on a daily basis. So it tells you right off the bat who's winning and who's losing. The Iranians have been consistent throughout. They know where they want to go. They know what they want to accomplish. It's the United States that's changing the parameters of victory and changing, force structures and changing priorities on nearly a daily basis. And that's not the sign of a side that's doing well. That's a sign of a side that's desperate.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the significance of this war on NATO, given you've been focusing and talking so much about the NATO proxy war in Ukraine. Donald Trump has criticized the EU for not providing direct military support during this war. What would be the impact of this war on the future of NATO and subsequently its future in Eurasia?
I think this war is the straw that broke the camel's back when it comes to NATO's viability. It's over for NATO. The United States, NATO has failed to recognize the reality that it operates under, especially in the Cold War, post-Cold War era, where it doesn't serve as a partner or an equal to the United States, but rather as a subordinate element of American national security and foreign policy. NATO's job was to salute smartly and say, yes, sir, to the United States, not to come up with own independent thinking that's what's best for Europe. And they forgot that. And they forgot it against a man who holds grudges. And right now, Donald Trump is going to hold Europe to account for its failure to rally around his illegal war of aggression against Iran. Marco Rubio last night talked about removing 100,000 troops from Europe. That's it. That's over. Talked about, we're not going to come to the defense of those nations who didn't come to our assistance. Well, there goes Article 5. When Mark Rutte became the Secretary General, I said he will be the last Secretary General of NATO. And I think the facts will show that he will be the last Secretary General of NATO. It's over for NATO. They're finished. I don't know how long it's going to take for the flag to come down and the headquarters to close. If NATO exists more than a year from now, it exists in name only, because when the United States is not a part of the NATO structure, then NATO structure is incapable of anything serious.
And the consequence of that on Russia, Ukraine.
The Russians are already prevailing. Ukraine hangs on by the skin of its teeth. Much of the Ukraine's potential to continue resisting Russia is derived from the aid that is being provided by Europe. But the European posturing is always predicated upon security guarantees that are linked to NATO in NATO's existence, especially when it comes to, you know, the collective self-defense aspect. NATO can afford to have a tough posture if they believe that if Russia lashes out against one or more members, the whole membership comes to their defense. That's sort of a deterrence. But when the United States leaves, NATO loses that capacity. Um, and Europe will be exposed as the very weak, dysfunctional entity that it is. I think Ukraine will continue to falter. When Ukraine collapses, I'm not going to put a date on it, but I can say that Ukraine will collapse now and Russia will achieve everything Russia wants to achieve. And the fact is, because Russia is in such a strong position, Russia has the ability to, you know, intervene diplomatically in search of what some might call a grand bargain with the United States. And in addition to getting the Iranian conflict shut down on terms that will be acceptable to Iran and Russia, getting the Ukrainian conflict run down on terms that will be exclusively acceptable to Russia and to the detriment of Europe.
And should the Europeans be ultimately forced to make peace with Russia?
I don't know how you force them to make peace. I think Europe will want to make peace because Europe will have no option but to make peace, especially when the United States disengages from their collective security framework. Europe is incapable of defending itself. And as such, it'll be like a lamb being led to the slaughter. They'll have no choice but to make peace with Russia.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about Cuba, given that there has been analysis that um, after Venezuela, Iran, and then Cuba may be next, given Marco Rubio's life mission, as many analysts in Cuba are saying, um, uh, is to topple the government in Cuba. In your assessment, how likely is a coming direct war on Cuba?
Not going to happen. The United States has, shown fatal weakness when it comes to power projection. We lack standoff weapons. Is sufficient. All Cuba has to do is resist and wait out any American action. The precedent of Iran is manifest. Surrender was the solution of Venezuela. Cuba knows now it can either go the Venezuela route or the Iranian route. And Russia has shown that it's willing to back Cuba, sending multiple tankers to violate the energy blockade that the United States has placed on Cuba. The United States is not going to stop Russia. So I think right now, we're going to reimagine our strategic goals and objectives vis-a-vis Cuba, because the post-Venezuela hype that we were going to roll into Cuba and do the same thing to the Cuban leadership that we did to Maduro today is just empty threats.
The Russian tanker reached Cuba with its oil, and there were reports about it. Do you think there was some understanding between the American Coast Guards and the Russian, or did they just evade the Americans and reached Cuba?
Well, I think there was an understanding the United States wasn't going to take on an actual Russian flagged ship. They've been playing games with ships that reflagged en route, and therefore making it legally questionable whether or not it's actually a Russian flagged ship. But these tankers that are coming, they belong to Russia. They belong to the Russian Federation. The United States isn't going to touch them.
We'll leave it there, Scott. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have two requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.